Welcome to table for 92, element number 87, Francium. It's number 87 because it has exactly 87 protons within its nucleus. For Francium, or is it Francium? Francium.
I have one question, Dr. Frankenstein.
That's Frankenstein.
Well, I'm making French food. As you can probably guess, this element was named after France. So I'm making the Frenchiest of French foods, frog legs. I've had them quite a few times in France, and while there's not a lot of meat on them, they are pretty tasty. And the origin point of one of the most, pettiest ethnic slurs in existence. So Francium was discovered by Marguerite Caroline Perret right on the eve of World War II, when nationalism in Europe was perhaps at its zenith. Yeah, it's absolutely terrible and fascinating how many scientists were deceived by the allure of nationalism in the late 1800s and early 1900s to name chemical elements after their country in like a source of pride, even though like these elements were ostensibly discovered for the betterment of all people regardless of nationality. Even though like scientists strive to have like a Vulcan-like objectivity, we're human, and like we're subject to all those inclinations we probably know deep down are wrong. I mean, if I discovered like a new species of dinosaur, like I would be really tempted to name it after myself in some vain attempt at like scientific immortality. Plus like Thorosaurus, that's a cool dinosaur. It is interesting that we use the term frogs referring to the French, based on, eating frog legs, of course.
Well, what are you then? I'm French! Why do you think I have this outrageous accent, you silly king?
Ethnic stereotypes, they're just always so lazy. It's like after foods that they eat, right? Doughboys for Americans, limeys for British people. I'm sure I'm missing others, but frog legs are eaten in like tons of countries and cultures. Funny enough though, the earliest archaeological evidence of frog legs being eaten are from England, from a little over like 8,000 years ago. In France though, they started eating frog legs as a workaround to the mandates that the Catholic Church put down about meat consumption. Apparently, the church was angry about these French monks that were getting too fat off all like the rich foods that were available to them, and demanded the monks stop eating meat for certain days of the year. So the monks got the church to consider frogs as fish, so that they were able to eat, meat on the days that the church said they couldn't. Frogs live in water, so they must be fish, right? Like that's their argument, and yeah. Fish are frogs, frogs are fish. Okay, so first thing to do with these frog legs, soak them in a mix of whole milk and Dijon mustard for a couple hours before you fry them up. That helps to tenderize them, just like buttermilk and fried chicken. The lactose acid and enzymes in the milk do that work, but it also helps to like get the pond scum taste out of the frog legs. I gotta say though, these frog legs, I mean, it's like weirdly human looking. I don't know, they're very tasty, but like it is strange to see them for the first time. When the frog legs are about ready to cook, cut a few russet potatoes into fries, rinse in cold water to remove some of the starch, and then let simmer in a mix of water, white vinegar, and salt for a few minutes. All right, so Francium, super radioactive. So much so, it did kill its discoverer, Marguerite Catherine Perret, a French woman who had a really incredible life, actually. So she was born in 1909. Her father owned a flour mill, but he died in early 1914, right before the onset of World War I, which in a combination left the family destitute. Her mother taught piano, and that was part-time, and that was the only income that her family lived on. So Perret originally wanted to be a doctor, but that was impossible given her financial situation. So she was able to graduate from a Paris Technical School of Women's Education in 1929. It wasn't an actual degree, but she did qualify for work as a laboratory technician. Now at the time, Marie Curie, she's the most famous woman in France, probably the world, and her Radium Institute was located in Paris at the Jardin du Luxembourg, in a building that Perret actually described as melancholy and somber. Curie had helped to turn, the tide for women in science in France. And at the time, even though Marie Curie was never elected to the French Academy of Sciences, Perret was allowed to interview for a job at the Radium Institute. And to her surprise, Marie Curie showed up to interview her. I mean, this would be like applying for an internship at Apple and the ghost of Steve Jobs manifested itself to interview you. But yeah, apparently, according to Perret, the interview was a complete dumpster fire. and she left the interview with like the only solace that she would never have to return to that melancholy and somber building ever again. But for whatever reason, Marie Curie hired her, which turned out to be, a pretty good decision considering she would discover an element one day. So Perret would become a lab assistant as well as Marie Curie's personal assistant. Perret and the other women at the Radium Institute, like, they idolized Marie Curie, which is completely understandable. But the really sad part is, like, by 1929, people knew about the dangers of radiation poisoning. There was a study published actually here in New Jersey about the painters of glow-in-the-dark watches during World War I. It was the infamous Radium Girls, where they all died these like terrible deaths from licking their paintbrushes to a fine point and ingesting this radium-laced paint. It was awful. But when Marie Curie was, asked about safety protocols in her lab, like, she insisted that the French system was way safer. But these women that worked under Curie later on clearly said like they had virtually no safeguards in place while they were handling, radioactive material. And considering basically all of them died from radiation-induced illnesses, I'm gonna go ahead and believe them over Marie Curie on that point. But yeah, I really think both Marie and Pierre Curie early on were like lying to themselves about the harmful effects of their life's work, right? It was such a new field in physics, and like they thought the applications of radioactivity were like near universal. So like I can't help but find myself like sympathetic to the ignorance of the dangers that they had. I mean, sometimes optimism kills. It's just really disappointing because like I have so much respect for the Curies, but like they were clearly blinded by the allure of radioactivity to accept the risks they and their employees were undertaking. That's the conditions Perret and others were working in at that time. It would be just like so illegal today. But way before Perret was even born, the search for francium had started with the publication of the first periodic table of elements by Dmitri Mendeleev. When that came out in 1869, only 63 of the 92 naturally occurring elements were known about. So that first table was really like a template with a bunch of missing pieces like on a puzzle board, right? The piece for 87, Mendeleev had named ecocesium because it's right below cesium in row 1. They still had a long way to go from 1869. They didn't know about radioactivity yet. They didn't know about noble gases. They didn't even know about atomic numbers yet, or even how many elements there would be in total. So a lot was, happened in that 50 years after the periodic table was published. So after 83 and bismuth on the periodic table, like there's all of those elements after that, like they're very rare, they're very heavy, dense, radioactive. And so because they're so difficult to find, like you had this happen like all over the world and with a lot of other elements, there's a bunch of claims from different physicists and chemists all over the world thinking that they found it and that they, filled in the spot for the missing number 87. But they were just, excited that, and they kind of convinced themselves they had found something that they really couldn't prove beyond like their own biased imaginations. It makes sense. Like there was a lot of unknowns back then. They had to get past a lot to understand how something as radioactive as francium could be kind of like parsed out. Just like most French fry recipes, like you have to do a double fry for the crispy yet fluffy potatoes. So first do a shallow fry in peanut oil and, wait until they get a little color, just like blonde. Take them out, let them dry off, cool down before you do the second fry. So usually like these rogue elements that, at the end of the periodic table could be found through the tried and true method of X-ray spectroscopes, but not francium. Plus, actually there's only like 30 grams of francium in the entirety of Earth's crust. So there's that, like that was one of the big problems that was going on. Yeah, since people didn't know about radiation yet, and because 87 is in the same row as alkali metals, people were looking in metal ores for number 87. But yeah, those 30 grams of francium are super spread out in the Earth's crust, so that wasn't gonna happen. But there's one famous case about like the almost discovery of francium by Fred Allison. He worked at what's now called Auburn University in Alabama, Alabama Polytechnic back then. He thought every element had its own time lag during the Faraday effect, which has to do with light and electromagnetism. He was wrong, but he boldly claimed that he had not only discovered 87, but also 85, and he wrote like a bunch of these academic articles extolling his discoveries, and even had an exclusive in Time magazine back then. Now we know he was wrong, but it's a classic case of like pathological science where people get blinded by their not discoveries and depart from the scientific method without realizing it. They're so overly hopeful they ignore evidence contrary to what they found. It's kind of like confirmation bias. So anyway, yeah, he was wrong, but he named his discovery Virginium after his home state. Probably didn't hear that one perfectly. So yeah, the next person to claim 87 as their own was none other than Horia Hulabai, which fascinating guy. He's not recognized as having discovered an element, but he was actually the first one to isolate 85 accurately, which would later be known as acetine. So like, he was a great scientist. He was an expert in X-ray spectroscopes, and he thought he had found undetected spectral lines that represented, 87, later Francium. He even named it Moldavium after the Romanian province where he was born. So yeah, then there was a Soviet scientist who claimed to find it in the 1920s and wanted to call it Russium. Yeah, you can just see like the blatant nationalism that was going on in science, right? Virginium, Russium. It is like really frustrating. Like, the scientists, they're supposed to be objective and rational, but like they get swept into all of this like nationalism at the end of the 1800s, and the competition between countries in Europe was increasing like until it finally blew over into the most destructive wars the world has ever seen, and it permeated like every part of society, like all the way down to naming like fundamental parts of the universe after your own little country in some like vain attempts to like build up their clout. It's just frustrating, We can rename elements, like the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry could technically change the name of elements, but like, it's not really that big of a deal today, and they're not going to do that. But it's part of the history, which is part of the political atmosphere at the time the last elements were being discovered. I don't know, I guess it's just a pet peeve of mine, but at least, so far all the elements that were named after countries still exist. Because like, think about that. It would be funny, like, if we had elements named after countries that are gone, like if there was an element named like Austro-Hungarium or Ottomanium, that would be kind of funny. But so far, they're all still around. We'll see. For a quick sauce a la francais for the salad, 2 cloves pressed garlic, 3 teaspoons lemon juice, 3 teaspoons mustard, 6 tablespoons mayonnaise, 12 tablespoons grapeseed oil, and 3 tablespoons chopped herbs, whatever you have in the garden. And you just whisk that all together and add salt and pepper until you got the taste that you like. So finally, back to Marguerite Perret. She had been giving a mandate from Marie Curie to isolate and study radioactive elements, especially focusing on actinium, which had been discovered at the Radium Institute in 1899. So yeah, Marguerite had started working with Marie Curie at the age of 19 in 1929. Curie died in 1934, unfortunately, of aplastic anemia, which is where your like red blood cells aren't producing enough, and that was absolutely from radiation poisoning. So Marguerite Perret was left without her boss and mentor, but she kept chugging along, studying these rare radioactive elements while simultaneously like furthering her education. So in 1935 then, a paper from the US was released claiming a new kind of radiation had been discovered called beta. Alpha radiation, they already knew about. That's where every alpha particle emitted loses 2 protons. And remember, the atomic number of a chemical element is based on the number of protons within their nucleus. So for beta radiation, it gains 1 proton. So in 1939, Perret, she's working with near pure actinium. It's like 99% pure, number 89. Perret observed the beta radiation from actinium forms 1 more proton, creating the element thorium, 90. The alpha radiation then loses 2 protons, creating number 88, radium. But that 1% didn't behave like the others did, and the alpha radiation created number 87, the long sought after element. So this is really hard to observe though. Like, the half-life of number 87 is only 21 minutes. But Perret, she had years of experience in the lab and was one of the world's experts on this particular field of nuclear physics. And oh yeah, by the way, she was still in university while this was going on. Like, she actually successfully defended her dissertation on the discovery of element number 87 in 1946. And that would be the last naturally occurring element discovered, which makes sense. Like, having gone through that history of how 87 was found out with a half-life of 21 minutes, that's a hard one to observe. So yeah, this is really funny though. Like, she didn't originally want to name it Francium. She wanted to name it Cadmium because she just loved cats. No, that's not why. That would be really funny though. She wanted to name it Cadmium based on the cation or the net charge of an ion, since she believed number 87 to be the most electropositive cation of any chemical element. But I guess she didn't speak English well enough to know that everyone else would just think she was naming an element after a cat. So she went with Francium to honor her country, in which so many, especially radioactive elements, had been discovered, and that name was accepted, so we got Francium. Oh, and Perret became the first woman admitted to the French Academy of Science, the organization that totally screwed Marie Curie out of that distinction. Classic old school sexism. No one has actually held a piece of francium, though. It's so radioactive and rare. But in 1995, at SUNY Stony Brook's physics department, they were able to bombard the gold isotope 197 with oxygen-18. That would eventually yield 300,000 atoms of francium, enough to observe light-beaming fluorescent light coming off it on camera. But yeah, like, francium has no uses outside of laboratory, but, you know, it's a cool story, though. Curie herself had hoped that francium could possibly help treat cancers, but you know, like, there just isn't enough of this stuff to do anything with at the moment. And it turns out, like, francium itself is cancer-causing radioactive chemical element. Marguerite Curie is remembered for having discovered francium, breaking the glass ceiling in the French Academy of Science, being nominated for the Nobel Prize in Physics 5 times, but probably most importantly, finally taking the dangers of radioactivity in the lab seriously and pioneering a lot of the safeguards that are still used today. Ultimately, though, Curie would die of bone cancer in 1975, often attributed to the radiation she picked up while working at the Radium Institute. After her death, her body confirmed this. I mean, she was still, like, extremely radioactive, even in death. I mean, the same thing happened with the Curies, you know, famously. I mean, I wouldn't call her like a martyr for science, but like, just like the Curies, like, they absolutely, like, sacrificed their physical beings in the search for scientific greatness. It's not like fried chicken, it's like kind of similar, but there it is. The Frenchiest of all elements, francium, and the Frenchiest of French foods. Oh yeah, and also too, mayonnaise with fries, like the French do. Absolutely fantastic. Thanks. See you next time.